Taiwan is caught in a political limbo. Across the waters is China that claims Taiwan as a part of its territory. Countering Beijing is the United States that is playing the role of the neighborhood police. This has emerged as the biggest flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific. Both countries are not backing down, and now America is mulling sanctions on China. Sanctions that Washington thinks will deter it from invading Taiwan. The sanctions will go beyond the measures already taken to restrict trade, but it is not just the US that is mulling sanctions. The European Union is also under diplomatic pressure from Taiwan to do the same. But what you must understand here is this: all these deliberations are at an early stage. This is because imposing sanctions on Beijing is very different from imposing sanctions on Russia, given how intrinsically the economies are intertwined. China claims Taiwan as its own territory. Last month, Beijing fired missiles over the island. Xi Jinping has vowed to reunify the democratically governed island and has not ruled out the use of force. Taiwan's government strongly rejects China's sovereignty claims. In Washington, officials are now considering options, debating over a possible package of sanctions against China. Taiwan also has raised the issue of sanctions with European officials. They did that right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but the call has now intensified after China's military exercises. For now, Taiwan has not asked for anything specific. It just wants Europe to plan on what actions it will take if China attacks. The EU has so far shied away from imposing tough sanctions on Beijing. This is because of how dependent the economies are. The EU is China's largest trading partner. In 2020, China overtook the US in becoming the EU's largest trade partner. Since then, trade has only boomed between the two sides. In 2020, the EU's trade with China was worth $637 billion. In 2021, it was $695 billion. European sanctions would require all 27 member countries to agree. And this makes consensus tough, always. All of Europe, excluding the Vatican, has formal diplomatic ties with Beijing, but they do not share any formal ties with Taipei. This despite extensive private contacts between Taiwan and Europe. In fact, Taiwan's de facto ambassador in Washington hosted international lawmakers on Wednesday, lawmakers who back sanctions on China. The unannounced gathering included 60 parliamentarians from Europe, Asia, and Africa. For now, there is no fixed sanctions package that the West has decided upon, but things could change fast if China attacks Taiwan. What remains to be seen here is if the West will be as united as it was during sanctions on Russia. And with me on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. is James Schmelin. He is the Senior Director of the Albright Stonebridge Group. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. Let me first ask you to comment on why it is going to be a huge challenge for the West to really come together and sanction China as opposed to what it was like when it sanctioned Russia.
Thank you very much for having me here. I think the first place to start here is actually in what the story is, which is the U.S. and Europe thinking through options for what to do should China take the ultimate step, and that is militarily invading Taiwan. This is not an instance of the U.S. or the EU initiating violence. That would be Beijing's choice. And I think that direction is important. As you highlighted in the rundown, the U.S.-China relationship and EU-China economic relationships are significant. U.S.-China trade in 2021 was $786 billion. That's the largest trading relationship in the world. These are deeply interconnected economies. There's no doubt about it. But what we've seen over time from the US, from EU countries, also from countries like Japan and Australia and India in the Indo-Pacific, is a concern about China's behavior and a concern about relying on China for crucial exports, things like semiconductors or natural resources or other kind of very important strategic imports that because of China's economic growth, they've emerged as a primary supplier for in the global economy. And that's what's pushing a lot of the policy consideration here, because no one wants war in this region. Ultimately, if China takes that choice, there will have to be a reaction. And unfortunately, recent behaviors, including military exercises and other actions that China has taken, around Taiwan, have indicated they may be growing to a point of belligerent intent.
If I can ask you to elaborate on that as well, because a lot of assessment when it comes to China's reaction so far has suggested that it will leave no stone unturned to try and express its anger over the issue of the lawmakers visiting Taiwan and the kind of support that the West is trying to provide to Taiwan. But just how far do you think Beijing would be willing to go when it comes to Taiwan?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a period of time where the U.S. and China are, and other powers, this is not just a two-nation conversation, are trying to determine how to relate to each other in a new power balance. It's no longer a region dominated economically and militarily by the United States or by any other power. The U.S. has been committed for a long time to the core tenets of a relationship that were brokered in the 1970s when the U.S.-China relationship kind of resumed. The question now is whether China, as it grows, as we've seen, frankly, on the line of actual control with India, as we've seen in its behavior towards Australia and Korea and Japan and others, how, as China grows, as China becomes more assertive, is that, how are those behaviors going to intersect with the security of others, whether that be physical security or economic security? I think this is a moment where the problem is we don't know. No one knows how far China will go. People fear how far China will go, and therefore they're planning for worst case scenarios. I have to draw the corresponding relationship here to the Ukraine situation. No one outside of the Kremlin wanted Russia to choose to invade Ukraine. Unfortunately, the intelligence indicated it was. Unfortunately, the information available to governments indicated that it was going to happen. So the U.S. policymakers rang alarm bells and tried to organize a coalition to head it off. That failed, but the result of that effort was basically unity, a broad-based unity and understanding that Putin made this choice. Ultimately, should China make these choices around Taiwan, that would be China's choice. No one wants armed conflict in this region.
Indeed. We are leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast.
Thank you very much.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.